impressive because it is across the entire state. We have women from Lawrence, Topeka, Lincoln, Liberal, Wichita, I mean, all over. And I think it really shows how strong the women's movement was at that time. So does anybody have any questions about Phyllis' work?
Thank you, Marlene. I should note that one of my observations is these artist selections were varied. I don't think we probably gave them enough direction on the 13.
I would agree.
I know one of them was great, but was only national figures. And I know you've kind of hinted around and addressed it, but at the time, the piece one, you know, it depicts a current legislator and some signage for a current political issue. So
She did take that out. I don't know if you saw that. She actually came to Topeka and removed that one sign and put in another one, and well, I'll show you.
hoping we'll get it up on the screen. But the thing is, she did work with the committee to address our historical concerns. Yeah.
She moved it to something like votes.
Okay.
But yes, you're right.
Okay.
We did have discussion.
Perfect.
She was much more liberal than probably most people would appreciate. And I did talk to her about changing these women. That's why.
Okay.
I like the design, but I think she could include more of the Kansas one and less of the historical, or less of the current. And I think that you're right. We wanted too many things, and we didn't narrow it, I think, sufficiently. I mean, I suppose everything comes from those.
And it was new for me as well. I will say, Frank, one of the ones not selected would have been somewhere around the 3,800 pounds, the clay tile hanging on the wall. And they had a plan for that, but I thought that might give you a little pause. I guess I'll go ahead and comment on the others not selected since I was there. I thought the textile one was very innovative, but
That was Geraldine's.
I also thought that it would be difficult to, you know, it would increase your chances of walking by without stopping. You had to really pay attention and would be needed on captioning. And also we had a portico and applied our architectural mode that would have needed a lot of massaging to fit with, and I wasn't sure how we felt about that. So of those, I think you selected the mural that best depicted your goal. But before I turn it over to the committee for any questions, you know, that is the thing that we have. With this one going in, I think a lot of us thought maybe we were looking at sculpture or something, because this was one of the first ones where we had something different. But it is another mural. So at that, I will turn it over to the committee for any questions of Marlene or commentary.
So you referenced while the, I guess the art is being created, there would be a temporary exhibit. Do we know what approximately that duration looks like, or what from the time they start?
Phyllis estimated that it would take approximately 10 months for her to do the large painting. And she would do that in her studio, not here. And so at some point, we would need to set a date for installation and that kind of thing. But the bulk of the work she would do, I believe she's Manhattan, I believe she would be working in her studio there to actually do the work. So, and it is a painting on canvas, so it would then need to be hung, basically.
Okay.
And I didn't, in a question I'm sure you have, but I don't have the answer, I'll have to ask her, is that she talked about on the side having a little plaque. I assume that would be a plaque that would be mounted and would list the names of the women, the prominent women, maybe not all of them, but the prominent women, and then give the QR code, which then people could get additional information for.
So that would go up at the same time. My concern is we
Would
have
be.
this plaque and this QR code talking about something to come. 10 months isn't a
No,
very long.
it would happen all at the same time. It would
Okay.
not happen in stages that we would like. We haven't talked about it as a committee, but we would like to make it a celebratory event. And, you know, she would have do the installation, and then shortly thereafter, we would have kind of a grand unveiling and celebration is kind of my image, but we haven't talked about that yet.
So Marlene, I know, so you have 10 months, but I also know that there's fundraising needed. How will that affect the timeline?
Well, it shouldn't affect the timeline too terribly much because it's an ongoing kind of thing. We do have her cost, I didn't write it down, but was roughly around 70,000, I think. And we have half that already available. So, and we as a committee have, actually, we've drafted some fundraising letters, and we have identified places where we could actually go for grants as well. And so yes, I know there's work to be done, but I'm optimistic as well that it won't be a terrible ordeal to raise the money.
My other question would be, I know we identified possible areas like across from the cage elevator. I guess a follow-up request would be something that shows the scale, the 18 by 8 on that wall, what that's going to look like, how that
Oh, okay.
compares to maybe the Brown v. Board or some of the other murals we have in the complex. I think that would be important for the committee.
I will ask her if she can do that, Frank. I'm sure she can, because she obviously has talked about doing a video. So, yes, we'll work on that you could have that. And it might not be the finished piece, but it would give you an idea of the size and how it would fit.
Didn't Phyllis give us a mock-up of that wall against that wall? So she has that. Is that what you need, or
Yes, I bet
her-
if I went back and looked at her slides,
her slides? She already has
yeah,
that we can-
yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I would just want to make sure with the 10 months it takes to create the art, the fundraising, that we as a committee would identify a location so that we do not consider another exhibit for that location, knowing that we've now set aside.
I thought that we already had decided that the wall across from the cage elevator was,
I think
we
we threw
did
out a
2
couple
spots, but that
locations
was,
because we weren't sure if it was a sculpture or a mural.
right, I know.
So I think we'd have to take that up as a committee.
Okay.
Yes, every artist that submitted that showed the location in their presentation was using the wall opposite the cage elevator. That's prime real estate there, so.
So one follow-up then, special lighting. Has the artist had any ideas if the lighting there is sufficient or what would be required to light this size of a piece of work?
I don't recall that, I think that I would go with that the lighting there might have to be redirected a little bit, but they would not need to have additional lighting, is my understanding. But,
Yes, some of the artists did ask that specifically, and without giving, specifics, because we did tweak them for some of the other murals, were correct. So, yeah, I did not think, and no one just said that they needed additional augmented lighting. So I think that would be our call on what works. Yeah, I just want to make sure that's included in the cost. Okay, good call. Okay. Representative Wren, yes.
Good morning, I apologize for
good morning, Valdivia.
I don't think I caught it, but is it the intention to put these Kansas suffragettes in this? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's 13 and 13.
Yeah, she's got some in already. She's got quite a few in already.
They're not identified, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, you don't.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, no, they aren't. The only one I can technically, is Karina Nichols.
Okay.
And then this lady over here helping is
Oh, okay.
and these are the women
Oh, okay. Or put them someplace else.
yeah, right.
All right, all right. Thank you. That was only my question. Thank you.
Curtis, any comments?
Yeah, actually, are there plans in place for where the video file is going to live for its streaming?
No. There aren't plans in place for the video file. I thought that was very innovative of her to have that. And I guess in my ignorance, we did not ask. I imagine that it could be a YouTube file.
My thoughts about that is that in the future, say, I don't expect YouTube to go away in 20 years, but it might. So there may be some sort of minimal costs associated with keeping that video file active so that when people scan that QR code, it goes somewhere.
I will ask. I don't know the answer to that. I don't. Yeah, I guess we'll just have to find out, as well as to talk about where the original would be kept, which I'm assuming would be the Historical Society. But again, those are things that didn't come up when we were talking to her. And those are very good questions that we'll have to follow up with.
Are there any comments from the floor? I see we have a lot of people on deck for our upcoming meeting, but including Joe, our former Capitol Visitor Center. Any comments? You saw this space every day for years, so.
First up on the agenda anyway.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, with that, does the subcommittee have a recommendation to approve this selection?
Yeah, I move that we approve the selection.
We recommend
That
to
we
the full
recommend that-
committee.
The whole committee, yes.
Any more commentary? Second?
Second.
Thank you so much, Marlene.
You're welcome.
And with that, we will close the subcommittee meeting and get ready for the full committee meeting. Good morning, everyone. We will call the 2023 Capital Preservation Committee meeting to order, and we will start with our introductions. My name is Patrick Zollner, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Kansas State Historical Society. This is my second meeting of here. I was the interim director last year and was confirmed this past March. So I'm glad to see all of you. And we have several new members, so we will start the introductions. I guess we'll go to my left.
Happy to. Good morning, Representative Valdini Nguyen from Kansas City, and just looking forward to continue to serve on this committee. Thank you.
I'm Curtis Young. I am the director of the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission, and I am excited to learn what's going on with the Capital Preservation Committee.
Senator Chase Blasey, representing parts of West Wichita, West Sedgwick County, and my third year on the committee.
Corey Sheedy, I'm Chief of Staff for Senator Dinah Sykes, and I'm her appointment.
Will Lawrence, Governor Kelly's Chief of Staff and Governor's appointment.
I'm Anthony Hensley. I too am a governor's appointment, and I served in the legislature for 44 years. I was in the House for 16, and I served in the Senate for 28. And in the 24 of those 28 years, I was very proud to be the Senate Minority Leader.
Frank Burnham, Deputy Secretary of Operations for the Department of Administration, also Director of Facilities Management.
Jesse Bourgeon, State Representative for the 52nd House District, which is here in Topeka, southwest, western part of the Shawnee County. So glad to be here.
Joe Brentano, former KSHS employee, coordinator of the Capitol Visitor Center, but now with the Amelia Earhart Hanger Museum in Atchison, Kansas.
BJ Harden, Chief of Staff for Speaker Hawkins, and I am his appointment.
Gary, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm only here because I can hear and see better over here. I'm Gary Dieter, and I'm Secretary for the committee.
Thank you, Gary. Well, our first order of business is the subcommittee report for the Suffragist Memorial. I think most all of you just heard our subcommittee, or most of it. The presentation by Marlene Merrill, who can be available for questions, was to select the artist Phyllis Pease for a mural of them at the location we discussed across from the cage elevator. So at this point, does anyone have any questions of Marlene or of the subcommittee, or how do we want, or any commentary whatsoever? I'll turn it over to the floor. Oh, Senator Hensley.
When you said that it would be across from the cage elevator, is that on the first floor?
Well, that's an excellent question. Without digging through our previous notes, we had identified at least 2 locations. Marlene, do you remember what we told? It is on the first floor. Okay. First floor, yes. Okay. Yes, thank you for that clarification. The recommendation of the subcommittee was to approve this selection. If there's no other commentary, do we have a motion to approve the subcommittee's recommendation?
Make the motion.
Representative Nguyen has moved. Do we have a second? Will Lawrence second. Any further discussion? Frank.
So I guess my question would be the next action as far as schedule. Will there be a follow-up report as far as timeline and updates on fundraising, or?
Please come on up, Marlene.
I forget that we're recording. Yes, I can definitely provide updates, both to Patrick, who can then disseminate, or if there is another Capital Preservation Committee meeting before we get to, yes, I definitely want to keep people updated in terms of the progress and in term, both with fundraising and the art. But also we'll need your advice when we do kind of the memorial, the presentation, when it's the completed art. So yes, I anticipate that there'll be updates, and they can either be verbally in front of the committee, or I can work through Patrick.
So I would then request, when we get to that point and working with the artist, more details on how the art will be affixed to the wall. We talked about lighting reconfigurations, just to make sure that all that's captured in the fundraising and the budget so that no state monies are spent.
We're well aware that no state monies are available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Somewhat of a follow-up. Do you have a date certain that at least you'll have the artwork in the final format?
She estimated that it would take approximately 10 months. And of course, we haven't notified her yet, of course. And we will need to do some negotiation with her in terms of some of the changes that the committee wanted to do. And so, so the 10 months might not start for another month or so before we.
October.
Yeah, so I would say that in terms of the final project, that we're roughly looking at another year. Might be a little quicker, might not be. It all depends. But she has been very, very workable, and it seems very open to change. So we're excited about this.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. Any other questions? Oh, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have this picture? I'm assuming it's this one.
We were having some technical difficulties earlier. We were hoping to be able to put it on the screen.
So is this action item approving an actual mural?
Yes, that is correct.
An actual mural. Actually, I mean, it's pretty much the same as what you have there. It's just that Phyllis came in and actually painted the new little.
So it's this sign?
Yeah, it's that sign.
Do we have all these words somewhere? I mean, it's hard to read a lot of this. I mean, this is going on the wall. We want to make sure.
Yes, actually, what the words are above there is the actual states, the state of Kansas, when it passed the right to vote, that is the language that was in the bill, basically, the way it's worded.
And what's the sign that the lady on the very far right is holding?
The very far
You
right.
will never, and then there's a bunch of words.
Oh, yes. These are the people that we need to replace. And what she did is to take history and bring it forward. So this actually is an immigrant person, and I can't remember what the words are, but these people on the far end are current, and so they're going to be replaced.
Okay.
basically.
So I think before we take action, we might want to get a final depiction of the changes before we make any final decisions. That'll be my recommendation, was to not take a vote on this today if we're actually approving a mural.
Okay. And thank you, Senator Blasey. And during the subcommittee meeting, I had mentioned that, yes, I was at the interviews of all the artists, and this one did have some, originally, some current political sentiments expressed in the background. And so the League of Women's Voters asked to alter that, but we can certainly see the final draft of the mural before approving. I have a question: how do we, as a committee, since we basically meet annually without a special meeting, how we want to address that, so we don't put it back another year?
I think we could certainly ask the speaker and the president for another additional meeting, either first of next year while the legislature's in session, or we can do it sometime before the session starts. But I'm sure they'd be happy to accommodate our request to ensure we get the mural correct.
Thank you, Senator Blasey. So do we need to vote on the original motion and second before we move to your amendment?
I could make a substitute motion, if that makes it easier, that we delay the adoption of the subcommittee report until a final depiction of this art piece could be distributed to the whole committee at a future meeting, and we'll work behind the scenes to try to get a letter to the leadership for an additional meeting.
Thank you. Do we have a second for the alternate motion? BJ has second. Any further comment? Representative Nguyen?
Thank you. And I understand what your concern is. If I understand the presentation, you will not approve, if your substitute passes, you will not approve for another year. Now, if that's what you want, that's what you want. But as we have had experience with murals, those murals are going to change a little bit, perhaps. I'll give you an example. The Brown mural did not have the same image as the dominant image of the female when we approved it, but that as the artist works through it. So with respect, I will oppose your amendment only because it will delay approval for another year. Now, again, I understand years of getting murals completed. Brown took a long time. But I would think you would not want to wait another year, understanding that if those are the four images, or you want clarity of the language, you can get that before a year. So thank you, sir.
Will has raised his hand first. Will?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have reservations about this motion because I don't want to lose that much time. I guess my question is could we maybe be more specific in the motion that a meeting would be required to take place again before the end of the year? Because I would not want this to go into next session without this being dealt with. I don't know that I'm in a position to support the motion unless it's pretty clear that we're going to come back in the very near future with the final mural to support this, because I think it's an important one that should move forward.
Thank you. I know we have Chase and then Senator Blasey and Corey who also have comments.
Do we have an idea when the artist will be able to give us a final draft of the new artwork?
We can be in contact with her early next week as to how long it would take to do modifications. That I'd have to leave it to her. I would imagine, I'm not an artist, so I really need somebody who knows art to tell me that. I mean, she had no problem coming in and replacing a sign, but that was a pretty simple thing to do. Replacing different women and kind of changing a little bit, I would imagine would take a little bit more work. But I may be wrong, but I would say a month to 6 weeks would be sufficient time for her, given other things, her other commitments, that she would be able to do that.
So 6 weeks would put us into December. And I don't know if we want to really rush the artist, in terms of giving her a strict timeline. I'm not suggesting in any way that we're going to wait an entire year to do this. I just think it's important that if we're going to put some piece of art that depicts history, we want to ensure, and it's in the Capitol forever, we want to ensure that it's right, and we want to ensure that it's done correctly. I think asking the leadership for an additional meeting, if possible, the art will be done by the end of the year. We can meet before the end of the year. However, we can meet also in January, assuming the artwork's ready, and I assume it will be if it's been 6 weeks. I just don't think we should rush something when we don't exactly know what it's going to finally look like.
I can certainly ask her how long it would take and communicate back with Patrick. You know, if she can do it quicker than, you know, that amount of time, maybe we can move forward quicker.
Thank you, Marlene. Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It sounds like the subcommittee addressed this in the directions to the artist week. Maybe it would help the committee to know what the directions were. Maybe that'd give this committee, some of the members, some peace of mind with that.
Thank you, Corey. I think more accurately is during the interview process, of which I was the only subcommittee member as part of that, brought up those concerns, anticipating some of this, and they've already addressed some of that and for now. So the subcommittee accepted that they were going to address those issues. And then, again, I think it was up there briefly. Some changes have already been made, and I think there's maybe some slight more. So it's, as the chair, it's a fair point to want to know exactly what we're getting, because those points are correct. This will be up here, and it's in a very prominent spot. I also would not like to wait another year. So if there's possible that a way that would please this committee to maybe be dealt with at the subcommittee level for final approval, or we could ask for another meeting, as Senator Blasey suggests. But I agree that this was the best mural, but it needed some tweaking. Frank.
So could we make a recommendation then today that we are at least approving the artist, we're approving the location? That would permit you to move forward with commissioning that artist for that additional work or those revisions, subject to final review of the content, maybe at the subcommittee level.
I like that suggestion. Is there any more commentary before we sort out which motions to address and vote on? Yes, Representative Borjon.
Mr. Chairman, being new to the committee, I just had a basic informational question. What are you needing to raise to fully get this implemented?
We have roughly half, so we need to raise, her estimate was around 70,000. And that does include, you know, maintenance and installation, because we asked all of them in the RFQ, in the proposal, to include that, because we knew all expenses needed to be coming from this art. So we have about half raised, and we will need to raise roughly that equivalent amount.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Nguyen.
Thank you. And I would, in view of the, just in view of the full committee, I would probably ask the person to say final review of the subcommittee, then of course subject to full acceptance of the full committee. I think that would satisfy most of the, at least the newer members.
And so that would require an additional meeting for the full committee to request, which we can do. Okay. So where are we on a motion? Do we want to vote on Senator Blasey's?
I can withdraw my motion if you want to make a new substitute motion, or withdraw all the motions, but then we'll articulate the motion. Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion if the second's willing, and then we'll see what you're trying to propose as the new one.
Frank?
So my motion would be that we approve the artist as selected by the committee. We've approved the general content and the location, subject to review of the final image and content, as has been noted, with then full committee approval.
Thank you, Frank. Do we have a second? Senator Hensley, seconds. Any additional discussion or commentary?
Just a little.
Representative Nguyen.
And that's what we want, full approval of the committee, but of course the process has to go through the subcommittee first. Correct?
Correct. That was Frank's motion.
Yeah, you still have that little one step before it comes to full committee, and you're aware of that.
So any additional discussion? All right, how do we vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Congratulations, Marlene. We will be in touch, and we will, Senator Blasey, seek an additional meeting for the full committee once we know our timeline for the subcommittee. Yes, Representative Nguyen.
And I'm a detail person, but those who have concerns, Marlene, I would suggest to make it clear what the concerns are to either you and, if you want to know the source of the words at the top, then, but she has to know what the concerns are before you can approach the artist.
Yes, I think we will work this out, and hopefully we can, now that the artist has been selected, the artist can make the presentation with the final one for, if desired, at our next meeting, like with Ad Astra and our other procedures. So, all right, well, congrats. We got one sorted through. Next, I would call on Frank to give his report. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm Frank Burnham. I'm Deputy Secretary of Operations for the Department of Administration, and today I'm here to provide you with a general update of projects that we have undertaken during the last 12 months here with the State House and the State House grounds. Some of them are part of the building or historic in nature. Some of them are just general updates to let you know what my team is working on year-round, especially in the summer when we're not in session. So we completed, I believe it's phase 4, phase 5, it's hard to keep track now, of plaster repairs. So each year we go through and do an assessment of areas that are failing or coming loose. This last summer, we worked on the 5th floor common areas, some of the committee rooms, and then areas underneath some of the stairs on the lower floors. I do believe we're reaching the end of that project, but like everything else, we'll see. There may be phase 6. State House exterior general repairs. We did have a window break, what we'll call the drum, which is the upper portion of the dome that supports it on the east side. We suspect that was a bird strike. Obviously, getting a sheet of glass that high in the air is going to require a substantial crane and rigging, and they were not able to make it up the curved stairs, so it will be a major undertaking. Subject to the availability of that glass, it's currently under contract, whether it'll still happen this year or next year. We also had to replace some glass that was broken. We've had a series of vandalisms occur late last year, early this year. Those individuals were apprehended, but we did have etched glass on our north side, which was very hard to find and replace. It has now been repaired. And we had an arson event on the east side on the lower area in which a door was burned through with a torch and glass broke. And so that required a special contractor to come in and basically recreate that massive door and the hardware to match. So quite a deal. With regard to the visitor center, if you walk out during your lunch today, you'll see that the bronze doors were cleaned up and re-etched. They had not been touched since the original project, both the interior and interior doors, so they have a nice shine and sheen for our visitors. We are currently repairing some under slab drainage on the south apron. So there's some cones out there. The intent is to have that completed and to have the ceiling and the security scanning back in place at our visitor center before the start of session. We also had some gift shop ceiling repairs due to some condensation issues and leaks. Those have now been repaired. That area has been fully restored. Exterior stone cleaning is something that we continue to try to stay ahead of on the State House. We were able to get all of the stairs up to the first floor and all the cheek walls cleaned. I do believe they use some sealants on those, but that's something we need to stay up on. But again, it should look much better. We've added additional, I'm sorry, also I'd say the garage, for those of you that park in the garage, if you go down, the walls are getting pretty nasty looking. They've all been cleaned up. And so again, just trying to stay ahead of those items. Visitor parking signage was a thing that I had previously mentioned in years past. It was very difficult for our visitors. There was a little metal sign out there. There's now a really nice ornamental metal sign that matches the rest of our wayfinding signage. So hopefully that's a positive addition for our visitors. And then we replaced all of our accessible route signage. Again, there's an awful lot of construction happening in the Capitol complex and with the city, so we took an opportunity to try to improve our signage and keep our kiosk updated again for our visitors to allow them to find our visitor parking and then find their way to our State House Visitor Center, which is opposite our surface parking lot. Also, we're working on our LED lighting. So the lighting on the outside of the State House, especially the drum and the dome, had not been replaced since the original renovation. So there was an opportunity presented to improve that lighting with LED lighting. In doing so, we now have the option, or will have the option upon completion, to change the colors of both the upper dome and also the 4 porticos. That's the down lighting. That will allow us to, again, change those colors for events similar to this month with breast cancer awareness or whatever we deem necessary. It just gives us more flexibility while also improving our, obviously, energy usage. That goes in hand with some lighting that we had done previously on the Judicial Center fountain and also is planned for the new docking building. So it just gives our opportunity to use our campus to provide different lighting, so whatever the function might be. Those that might park in the State House garage, you should see significant improvements from last year. The Securities Committee had recommended additional lighting. We had a lot of dark areas. So again, we went through there, replaced all the existing LED lights, but we also added additional rows of lighting so that we do not have dark spots. That will also assist us with our new security upgrades and cameras that we're putting in for improved surveillance. So hopefully everybody will appreciate that. The Kansas Law Memorial, a few years ago, we expanded that memorial. This last year, it was brought to my attention by the AG's office that there were some names that were improperly engraved. Through their process and their fundraising and their maintenance funds, we were able to remove 2 of the large granite stone tablets. Those have to be shipped out and re-engraved and brought back. So we're in the process right now. So there are 2 tablets out there currently missing. The plan is to get them back and in place before next year's memorial or dedication. And then on the State House grounds, monuments and pavers, there was the Statue of Liberty. If you're familiar with the location, it's on the northwest quad. The base was in very poor disrepair, was falling apart, so we were able to replace that and recoat that. So it really improved that little element on our site. We were also took the opportunity to clean all of our monuments. When we added the Gold Star Family Memorial, we noticed that the Veterans Memorial and everything had been, the bronze was very tarnished, so we did go through and we have updated and cleaned all those monuments. Those have been recaulked. We've repaired a lot of the paver stones, and then a lot of the concrete surfaces around the State House complex. Finally, the brick pavers on the State House aprons on the north and south, which are very heavily used areas, were in disrepair and cracking and starting to move around. We were able to locate the exact pavers that were used during the renovation project. Those have now been replaced. So that's a summary of some of the items that we've addressed here in the last 12 months. I would like to also take this opportunity to introduce a few of my staff that are here in the gallery. I'll ask them to stand up and embarrass them a little bit. Brian Moore is our new State House building manager. He took over for John Warner, who had been here for 35 plus years. So he got a little bit of a learning experience during the tail end of last legislative session, but this will be his first full session, and so he's ready and willing to respond. I've got Chris Simons here, my deputy director, and she's in charge of the housekeeping and grounds, so she's the one that's taking care of keeping this place looking great and keeping the grounds in great shape, even with all the city projects and everything else that's going on around us. And then Carla Reed is our interiors person, and she's helping with a lot of the interior stuff. She did a lot of the carpet replacements and legislative research and some of the other areas recently, revisory statutes and some other work that we've done. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks, Frank. You've been very busy. I do have one question. So most of these things were items just over 10 years old from the original renovation now. Anything can be attributed to some, like with brick pavers, that surprised me. Weight, spec materials, any idea?
A lot of it is just every subtle little movement subjects it to catching a snow blade or something of that nature. I don't know that it's anything that we're doing out there as far as events or vehicle traffic or anything of that nature. We did have some settlement issues on the south side, just where we had settlement issues outside the paver area too. So we were able to kind of get back in there and rebuild those bases and relay some of that. So I don't know that it's anything that we're doing wrong or how we're using it. It's just, it's great that we're using it, and sometimes things wear out, and we're trying to stay on top of it.
Any other questions for Frank? Oh, Senator Hensley.
Frank, I noticed that on the north side, the stairs that are going up to the second floor, have those been redone? Because from a distance, they really, for lack of a better word, they looked to me like they were real moldy, or they had darkened quite a bit.
Yeah.
And,
So I'm in the Eisenhower building, and I look at those stairs every day, and I saw that same issue, especially after it rained, how dark they looked. We did come in and power wash and clean those within the last 60 days. So maybe we get a little rain here today, and I'll see what they look like.
when I saw them. So, good, I'm glad that you addressed that.
Senator Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hi, Frank.
Oh.
I just asked Patrick if you mentioned the Liberty Bell, even though that's really not part of our Capitol complex. Can you tell us a little about that? That we've been working on, and a few things that we've managed to move the needle on?
Certainly, thanks for bringing that up. Yes, last year I had alluded in my testimony that we were planning to reuse the Liberty Bell in some capacity with the new docking project. That is still the plan. We actually have that as a major site element on the plaza on the east side of the building that will face the Capitol. It will be fully restored and put in a fashion that we could actually ring the bell on special occasions, but also be able to lock off the ringer so that we're not having a lot of kids ringing it all day long. I had an opportunity recently to visit Des Moines and their Capitol, and theirs sits up on this big pedestal, and it's got this little dangly rope on it. So I think we can do a lot better, and I'm really excited about the opportunity. For those that don't know, it's currently down in the State House garage in about 4 different pieces. It weighs over 3,000 pounds. And I'm sure the tour guides are tired of taking people down to the garage so they can check that off of their 50-state bell checklist. So it'll be a great opportunity.
Thank you, Frank, and I did want to get that in because you've worked really hard on that, and that makes me very happy. And it's so the committee knows that we were getting emails, legislators, particularly in the Senate, asking about where this bell is, that there's sort of a passport out there that people want to see this bell. So we'll take them downstairs to see it now. But we also learn on a quick visit, it has a serial, it has a number, doesn't it? Wasn't it number 26, if my memory?
I believe so. There was a bell expert, if you can believe that. This gentleman had traveled all over the nation, and he gave us a heads up that he was going to be in Topeka, and we were able to have Chief Justice and some other members come over, and he gave us quite a little history lesson of the bell. So it's someone who we'll keep in contact with maybe and use as an opportunity to tell that story.
Exactly. So it was, even though it's not part of this committee work, I think we've done a good job on bringing it to our attention, and thank you for doing that too, Frank.
Thank you, Frank. A lot of great work there. Next on the agenda, welcome Senator Bowers, the Ad Astra update.
Well, yes, just in time. Well, I have to let you know I'm late for a good reason. Our daughter had a baby girl yesterday, their third, but their first little girl. So I was grandma duty, and earliest the daycare took 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds was 7:30. So from Marysville, it's a quick trip. So I'm very happy to be here and just in time. And if you don't mind, Patrick, I think Frank and I can do this one together, that we're still continuing to work on this. And as far as, I didn't bring a handout, but where we're at with the Ad Astra statute, of course, our bill passed last year, is now pulling together all of the quotes to move forward for the fundraising, which we think we have well in hand. I know we were working with the monument director from Abilene, who put up the Eisenhower statue. And Frank has been working with another contractor on quotes for the grounds here and moving forward very fast. And I imagine within a few months, we'll have the funds raised. I believe the target area is around $300,000, somewhere in this range, maybe a little higher yet. But we think we have a good lead on how we'll raise that, and perhaps in time for the docking building going up and a celebration with them both together in the future. And then if Frank, can you add anything to that, Frank? That's just really brief with little paperwork.
I think you did a pretty good job of summarizing. Yeah, realistically, we would be a spring or summer installation pending the funding. We were very clear that we would not start the project until the funding was completely in place. We weren't looking for a partial repair because there are some bronze plaques that also have to be created that tell the story that go on the walls and some additional items. So I believe they're well underway. There seems to be a lot of interest out there. And now it's a process of just raising the money, and then my department will help facilitate the actual installation at that appropriate time.
And also with this, we knew we needed contracts signed as well. So our revisors back here are pulling the contracts together for us. So we'll have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed before we move forward. So I think we have a really good in hand.
Thank you, Senator Bowers and Frank. Frank, when you said spring or summer, that's 2025 when the new docking, is that the time frame?
Again, it'll depend on how quickly they raise the funds, but most of that was due to weather and setting those pavers and make sure we got a successful sub base and installation so that we don't have problems in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Senator Bowers or Frank at Astra? All right, well, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the first Kansas colored mural. And last year was a very successful legislative year with Ad Astra and this, but in some discussion and talking with Heather, we did not really formally create a subcommittee to oversee that. I think we mentioned a couple of names of people interested, like Representative Nguyen, Senator Blasey, and Frank, but I believe we need to formally create a subcommittee. There was also discussion of someone else that might be interested in the House to help fundraise. So my point is, how do we get started from here? And who is interested in serving on this subcommittee? Representative Nguyen.
Of course, I'm interested in serving on the subcommittee, and once again, I'll say murals take time, but they don't have to take as long as the brown mural. So that's the goal. But question, is it my understanding that the process is similar? And again, I'd have to ask you, how was the process handled? It seemed to have been similar with the suffragette memorial. Similar meaning requests for credentials, requests for proposals, review, and then acceptance.
Right, and in addition, we need to figure out the fundraising component.
And again, no state funds, so.
Exactly. Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For some reason, I thought we had a subcommittee already created, but I'm happy to serve on that committee. I am curious, can someone remind me, how much was the Brown B Board of Education memorial cost? And then what's the cost of this one? Just so far I can help put in perspective the cost of this construction.
I don't know if we know that. I think it was mentioned at one time, 100,000, but I would have to look through the records. I do not know what that cost. So, but yes, we did mention some names. I didn't know, we didn't have it formally in our minutes of the subcommittee creation. So with that, is there a desire to be the chair of the subcommittee? How does that work? Senator Blasey, you want to participate in the subcommittee?
Please.
Frank, since it involves the building. Does anyone else want to serve on this committee?
Frank gets no choice. You must be there.
He gets to. I will serve on it as well, just to be involved as chair. Any other discussion? Frank?
So again, I'd go back to availability of space, locations, potential locations. Now that we've voted through the suffrage memorial, that takes that wall out of play. So have we identified other locations? Should we be looking at that as we move forward?
Yeah, so we have quite the checklist that the subcommittee can work on. I know that Senator Bowers and I highly informally, walked around the rotunda on several floors looking at good similar cross-view locations. I would think Joe would be an excellent person on that committee as well, or to be involved. Is there any other discussion about First Kansas Colored? We just basically wanted to get it kicked off because we had the successful legislation and then there was no movement, so. Any other ideas or commentary? Okay, thank you. Heather, we got the committee this time, right? All right. All right, now we are moving on to new business and the suggestion for a fallen workers memorial. Is Donna here?
Two people, since you're about an hour and a half.
I am an hour and a
They
half.
are not here.
Okay.
I just emailed them to see if they could come.
Okay,
So, do
well,
you want to take a little break?
yes, we'll take a break and then we do have some other new business we can discuss until they get here. So with that, we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, well, we're way ahead of schedule, it's been pointed out, but let's go ahead and keep going. Under new business, we're going to wait a second for the fallen memorials, fallen workers memorial. We have another presenter, but Senator Bowers has some new business.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, this was brought to our attention by Representative from Hayes last year, that the murals, it's the Pete Felton, not murals, Pete Felton sculptures, the four, don't have any title underneath where they're standing. And help me out, this is on the second floor also, around the rotunda, our four statues.
Correct, and I think after was brought to our attention, we walked and we noticed that not even the John Stewart Curry or the other murals have any of those plaques or labels of any sort as well. So it seems like something that this committee should discuss on how we want to address that.
Yes, and I would also think, Patrick, perhaps we should have a subcommittee that we identify these spots and then move forward how large we want the plaque, or do we just want a small bronze plaque with the name to explore that a little deeper and then bring back our proposal? Does that sound
Yes,
logical?
I agree, because this is something that could be done well or poorly and reflect upon the aesthetics of the interior. So with that, are there anyone's interested in being on this subcommittee? I'm looking at Joe Brentano.
And I'll be happy to even chair it if you like.
Okay, so Bowers. Anyone else like to? Curtis, that's excellent. So, yes, thank you. Thank you, Representative Bourgeon. So is there any other discussion about this item? Senator Hensley.
I don't have any discussion about this item, but I do have another idea, if I may be so bold as to explain it.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure, yes, go ahead.
In this building, I had a conversation with the governor yesterday, and I told her there's a real misnomer. The conference room that is outside of the lieutenant governor's office is always referred to as the lieutenant governor's conference room, when in fact, if you read the inscription above the door, it's the governor's conference room. And in that conference room is a mural. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but if you get a chance, you ought to poke your head in there and look at that mural. It was done by a artist, I believe he is from Hayes. Yeah. And I have always believed that that mural should be out somewhere in the State House as opposed to back in that conference room, because I don't think the tour guides can even get in there to show tourists that mural because meetings go on in that room. And I think it's misplaced. It probably came to us and a previous administration made the decision, well, we don't have any place to put it, so we'll put it there, because it is within the governor's purview. And so as a future project, I would like to see this committee consider moving that mural. It is a great piece of artwork. It has, well, for example, around the Abilene area, there's a picture of Dwight Eisenhower, or Amelia Earhart in the Atchison area. Have you ever seen this, Patrick? Yeah, it's a fabulous piece of work. And I really think it should come out and be somewhere out in the State House. So I would propose putting that on the table for future consideration.
Okay, any other discussion about this? Would our plaque subcommittee suffice, or do we want a new subcommittee for this project?
Well, I think the plaque subcommittee would suffice if they'd be willing to take this under consideration. And in that case, I would be willing to serve on the subcommittee.
Sounds good.
Let's see, Heather, did you catch all the names? Oh, wonderful. Perhaps we could just meet during session when we come back in January and find a date. Wonderful.
Is there any other new business that someone wants to bring up? Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to put Director Day on the spot too much, but last meeting, I think you all had a briefing on the efforts to put our work in the committee rooms. I was wondering if we could get an update on that project, if possible. Sorry, Tom.
And Tom just told me he didn't have an update, but we'll make him talk anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sheedy. The artwork, I've been looking at artists all over the state. Their websites, different areas that we could find some suitable artwork. We also, Mr. Zollner and I have talked about some of the artwork that may be available to make prints and also that's within the purview of the Historical Society. We're just looking for all those types of artwork, but I want a representation of the state of Kansas from all over the state. You know, don't just find one artist that's in Topeka, Kansas or in Kansas City, but some of the artists that are also out west. There's some great art studios in Dodge City. There's one in, I believe, Liberal or Garden City, one of the two as well, and some in the north central area too. So, you know, I'm just looking at all those different areas. One of the things that I wanted clarified with the artist, I mean, not the artist, the person that gave money to for some artwork in the building. There's a gentleman who's a liaison between that anonymous donor and I asked him if prints and pictures are considered artwork in the anonymous donor's mindset, and they are. So it's not just necessarily paintings or that form of artwork that we're looking at. We're also looking at the possibility of some good pictures of landscapes, of buildings, of historical nature in the state of Kansas. So I'm just looking at all those different areas and have a list of probably 35 artists in Kansas who have some nice artwork and or picture prints that we could hang up in here. So, you know, a lot of it because of the picture rails that are on the walls in the historical rooms. As many of you know, the picture rail designates a historical wall within this building. So any of those types of paintings would have to be hung from those picture rails, could not be nailed into the wall, could not be, you know, put a nail in the wall on those certain walls. So that's something else that we have to look at as well. And the size, based on the size of the room, you know, in this room could easily handle 4 different types of artwork, maybe even 6. But some of the smaller rooms may only be able to handle 2 to make the room not look gaudy, for lack of a better term.
I appreciate that update, Mr. Chairman. And I mean, there's a lot of blank spaces and walls in these committee rooms. And I mean, a lot of people come through these rooms, they could see things. I mean, we could put murals in these rooms. I don't know if we ever talked about that. I think that could be a possibility. But this seems like a huge undertaking for you. There's a lot of space. I know the committee before talked about maybe having a subcommittee for this project. I don't know if this is time to consider such a thing. I mean, it seems like it's a lot to do, a lot for you to do. I mean, you're going around the state, looking at a lot of artists and going back with the donor. And I don't know how much money was donated from this individual, if there's a ongoing fundraising effort, because I don't think that amount will cover all the walls we have in committee rooms. So I don't know if that's appropriate this time, Mr. Chairman. I'll leave it to the committee on that, but it's just a thought I had.
Yes, and excellent point, but to clarify, Tom, we were principally talking about committee rooms, correct? Or were we talking about the State House as a whole for the art?
The initial was for committee rooms. And Mr. Sheedy brought up the amount. He wasn't sure how much the amount was. We have approximately $28,000 in change. Looking at artists all over the state, and depending on the size and the frames and all that kind of stuff, I could spend $28,000 on one piece of artwork. But trying not to do that, you know, but make them either smaller artwork, maybe a frame that is the same frame for every piece of artwork in the room, versus, you know, some of the more elaborate frameworks that are out there.
So at this point, Tom, are you willing to share the workload with the subcommittee, as Corey has pointed out? Or are we, at what stage do you want to?
Well, Mr. Zollner, as I told you, when you and I talked a little bit ago, I believe you and I could work together, but I'm glad to work with a subcommittee if that's the way this commission would like, the committee would like to go.
So since we will have another full committee meeting this year anyway for the mural, let's see if we are ready at that point, if that works for you.
That's fine, thank you.
Thanks. And then that way, Tom and I can have a further plan because we really haven't met.
And Mr. Chairman, if it's feasible, I could put together some snapshots of different pieces of artwork I have found throughout the state and see if that's the avenue that this committee would like to go to for some of that artwork, or I can have at least the list of the artists that I've identified so far as well.
Excellent. That sounds very good. Thank you, Tom. Yes, Senator Bowers.
And Tom or either, Patrick, thank you. Have we considered talking to, like, your shop, your museum? Do you have do you have pictures in storage that you would consider bringing out? And then if that's a problem, is it security, or if there's a reason why that wouldn't be something we could look at, borrowed artwork as well?
In the past, that has not been against our policy because of our curation standards for our historic art, to call it. And we don't really have a ton of that anyway. However, reproductions of our vast historical image collection for Kansas is available, and you've seen them in other areas of the State House already. So, you know, there might, if we had something that was just absolutely spectacular that we needed, we could look at and we could talk to our curators about, because we have our other artifacts here as well, but it doesn't also meet their temperature and humidity control standards. So that's been our issue in the past. But we could look at those possibilities. Aye, Senator Blasey.
I do have a quick thought. Maybe canvassing, if we take images that have already been captured and we could canvas it. I think it's a few $100 to put it on a large canvas, probably the cheapest way to do it and have it nice. But if you put it in glass, there's a good chance it could, the lighting could help, or could help prevent seeing the full picture of the art. Another thought I had was maybe theming some rooms. You know, if you guys want to talk about doing that, you know, this room looks like a really great room to be the air capital of the world. You know, you have Wichita in here all over the place. But I think we could look at doing some of that in some of the larger rooms, just put some themes in there, like the Flint Hills or the Little Apple or something. But anyway, just some thoughts are out there. But in terms of economic sense, in terms of cost of a portrait, I think maybe putting on a big, large canvas is probably the most affordable way to do it, unless we can find some borrowed art.
Frank?
I guess along those lines, if this subcommittee could at least establish that here are the mapping, or here are the opportunities, here are the parameters, here are the sizes, to your funding issue. I mean, some of this, I guess, would be permanent purchased art. Could some of it be loaned art from different galleries in Dodge City, or whoever else would want to display? Can we create opportunities for changing art in areas? And then who would approve that content, I guess, would be a question. Would that fall back to your guys' department, or would that be the subcommittee? Or I think that's a challenge.
Yes, and I think this could easily snowball, and you know, a lot of different interest of what theme should be. So I do think that's the purview of this full committee. But it also sounds like we're not even quite there to the subcommittee level, but lots of excellent points to consider. Curtis, did you have something?
Yeah, I'd just like to suggest that as you're looking for artists to get artwork from, that you take a look, if you have it, at the Kansas Touring Artist and Muralist roster from the Creative Arts Industries Commission, because these are Kansas artists that have gone through a process of vetting to be included on that roster by the commission. So there's some pretty great artists there.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Obviously, this is a much tip of the iceberg type of thing, but we will come back to you at our next meeting with a further plan. With that, I think we're still waiting on one, but let's go ahead and call on Donna Casement with the Kansas State Library to discuss a potential fallen workers memorial.
Or if you need anything. Several years ago, actually it was pre-COVID, I began a history project on the state library, which was originally the territorial library. And I wanted to put together a package of a history through the years, through news clippings. And it was several years before I got to the 1880s. And at that time, I came across some headlines that read, fallen worker, a workman falls to death and instantly killed. And so at that time in history, the newspapers, they were very graphic, I guess you could say. All the information was there on how most of these individuals passed away. And so I started collecting this information, and I put it in an Excel, and as I went through the years, I found more and more workers. And I was really surprised because I've worked in this building since 2006 and walked through the Senate chamber for 6 years, and now walk through the state library, and I appreciate all the amazing details of this library. But I've never read anything about a memorial to the men who built it, the bones of the structure. So I gathered this information and put it in a file and kind of moved on. And during session this year, Shane McCoy stopped by the library and I was at lunch and he said, "Hey, do you guys have any history on fallen workers?" And they said, "Oh, Donna's got that." So came back and I took my Excel sheet to Shane, and he was pretty excited about it because this is something he'd thought about for a long time. And so we worked together. A resolution was passed, 1718. Thank you for that, honoring these workmen. I thought it was unusual when the State House was dedicated in the early 1900s. I thought for sure there would be an article about the workmen, a list of the workmen who had died, and there was nothing there. And this is personal to me because I love this building, and also I passed by the big picture of the stonemasons that's on ground floor. And before I'd look at it, and it's like, wow, that's a really neat picture. And, some had their hats on and some didn't, and they had their lunch pails. And now it's, having read about these men that have fallen, it's very personal. And I think it's time that somehow, some way we memorialize these men that came to work and knew it was a dangerous job. They probably didn't get paid a whole lot. And a lot of them, well, not a lot of them, 8 that we know of, possibly 9. That was their last day. So that's what I'd like to say. Thank you for letting me testify. And Shane's not here, but if anybody has any questions, I can ask them or find out.
Thank you, Donna. Are there any questions in the committee?
Patrick, thank you. This was a really interesting project to work on, by the way, so thanks for all of the data you put together, some tragic deaths from the very top even. That's just horrible. Can you imagine going to work with no tethers and ropes like we know today? It's very tragic. To me, this is something we should look at after reviewing that. What if the artwork was in near where we have the tools downstairs when we walk in, as Capitol Visitor Center, something we could consider? Are you thinking of a statue or a mural or something that's already incorporated there?
I think Shane, I wish he may not have been able to get away. He has some ideas. I think he's talked about maybe an exhibit down by the picture of the stonemasons. I think he, in his testimony, there's possibly up in the dome, before they go all the way up, have some kind of plaque or something. So it's something to be looked at.
Even at the fifth floor, before you start to go up the steps, even a plaque on the wall would be very simple, but very appropriate location too. I don't think, some people get to the seventh floor and say, nope, I'm not going any farther, but we could consider the seventh as well, but even a plaque would be very nice.
We
touch.
also found a workman in 1950 that was sandblasting the dome that fell to his death. So we would like to include him as well. All right, thanks.
So with that, was there any other thoughts on what the memorial, what shape it would take? Or is this a mural, a sculpture? Have any thoughts?
From visiting with Shane, I think his view was it was more of maybe a display or a plaque, something smaller, more personal, maybe, if they each had their own individual plaque. It's something that could be looked at.
Things we're just thinking at what level that it would trigger needing a full statute, like where other murals have been passed, or what in the, Frank? You've got
That was a question I had, I guess, for the committee, or was what requires the approval of this body? Is it when we call it a memorial, or can it be a display? Can it be, and what areas specifically? Because if we're talking about the visitor center area and the entrance, I don't believe that requires.
I think that the Historical Society, we could put up an exhibit or display, help me out behind, but for a memorial or a mural in the State House proper would require a statute. Is that correct, Chris Gordon?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. The statute says any permanent display or monument proposed to be located on the state capitol grounds must be approved by the committee and authorized by passage of a bill.
And Chris, if I could ask, that's also a plaque on the wall, like on the fifth floor going up as well. Like a bronze plaque would require our approval also.
Yeah, I would think that would qualify as a permanent display as well.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call on Shane McCoy.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank the senators, the representatives, and everyone who's been appointed to the board today for giving us the opportunity to bring this to you. Donna's work has been excellent. She's been leading the charge for several years now, working at the Kansas State Library, and a lot of what you see in here are straight from her research. And so she's pretty humble about it, but she's done an amazing job. And we'd like to get these workers recognized if we could, keep this momentum going. We were fortunate in the most recent session of the legislature, the Senate recognized them with the resolution on the floor, and that was a great moment. But we'd like your permission for something a little more permanent. These guys worked hard. They worked in an era before any kind of safety considerations, no hard hats, no harnesses. 6 days a week, sunrise to sundown. And if you can imagine walking along those steel beams when it's cold and icy or over 100 degrees in leather boots with wooden heels, most of us would be out of breath just climbing the stairs, much less climbing up on the scaffolding. And one of the things I was hoping to make note of is whatever memorial you guys choose to approve, we'd like to leave a little breathing room in case we discover another worker who fell to their death that we haven't found yet. We think we've exhausted every avenue we have to discover all of them right now, but there are hints that there may have been another death in 1889. And the most recent death we discovered in 1950 was just in the last few weeks. So If you choose to approve a memorial, and I hope you do, please leave a little breathing room on it in case we discover another worker. And I have all of our research with us, willing to turn it over to anyone who'd like to double check it and stand for any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Shane. Are there any questions? Will?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure this is exactly a question, but as I've been kind of listening to this and thinking about it, it feels like, to me, it would make a lot of sense for there to be some level of a display, maybe in the visitor center. What I do like about that is I think that gives some flexibility as well if we discover others. That was a question that was in my mind.
It would be the perfect opportunity. The visitor center where all of the guests to Kansas, all the tourists, all the school children file through. There's already a pattern to their display that the Historical Society has up. A simple frame matching the displays that are already there. There's even photographs of the workers in the visitor center right now. And while we don't have names on those photographs, it's not out of the realm of possibility to believe, since one of the photographs was taken in 1888, the death span from 1886 to 1890, that some of the workers who fell to their deaths might even be in those photographs. And so it'd be the perfect place for it. Another good place would be another framed memorial honoring them up on the level where the dome tours leave from. The State Historical Society still leads dome tours 4, 5, 6 times a day for the public and school children. And if you hung a frame honoring those workers up there, they could look up and see it's dizzying, the heights these men worked under. And that's actually what got us started, was taking the dome tour. And I'd invite all of you to take that dome tour if you had the chance. The chalk names written on the steel beams, several hundred feet out over the dome. And you just look and wonder how they could ever get up there to do that. These were some amazing men and women.
Mr. Chairman, that was also the other part of my comment, that I think it might make sense to do something in both places. I think you have some opportunity in the visitor center, but I also do think and like the idea of when you're going up to the dome, that kind of puts in the forefront of your mind, as you're making that trip. So I think that also would be a place where something more permanent would make some sense. So that kind of my thoughts on this. I think it's a great project and very much appreciate you bringing it forward.
So what I'm hearing is in the visitor center, we could just simply, with the committee's approval and no other legislation, put up along with our exhibits, something attesting to the fallen workers, and then a plaque more permanent affixed in the dome or the 7th floor. Is that what we think as a committee, what I'm hearing?
That'd be my suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
Thank you, Patrick. Shane, would you rather see something on level 5 when you first start to go up, where the general public go up, or 7th, which, like the chicken out, I'm done? Or would you rather see it on that level with like more of a sacrifice at that level? If you got to the first 2 levels, then 7, it's there for you as well. Would you rather more people see it before they go up on 5, or
I would
what
check.
What are your thoughts?
Senator, I would check to your experience and that of the other historians on the board. But you're right, there is a level on 7 between where the inner glass dome is complete and the upper copper dome is visible. And that is the level where most people either go on all the way up the spiral staircase to the cupola, or they tap out and say, this is high enough for me. And I also believe that'd be the perfect place, because you can see the names scratched into the beams from that level. You can look out the windows and see how far down it is just to the roof, much less the ground. And I think it would be the excellent place to put one.
I think if I had my personal opinion, down by the tools and the workers, the old picture and the new picture, but then on the 7th floor where it is on sacrifice, get those 2 stories.
Yes, Senator.
People could feel that was more important there as well. Maybe not as many people see it there.
That's true. It's a quiet area of the Capitol, even on the busiest days. It's a far more intimate setting. And it also gives the historians with the Historical Society leading the tour the opportunity to answer questions before they go on up.
Thank you, Shane. And Patrick, what if your staff prepares mock-ups of what these two plaques could look like and then bring back to us as a committee to see if we'd like to change that, or, and then, as Shane suggested, leave room for names if we need to.
Sure, we can
So
do
perhaps you
that.
can work something up historical-wise and bring back to us.
Sure, that's doable. I would like to call on Joe, who's probably led 1,000 of these dome tours.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little tentative about, I think it might scare some visitors to think about that. And also, to the point earlier made, if a plaque is up in the dome, not all of our visitors would see that unless they take the guided tour, so they might miss it. But having in both places and interpretation done by KSHS downstairs could suffice on that. But I would think downstairs fits into the narrative more so than upstairs.
I would respectfully and gently push back on that. The dome is where most of these men, 7 of the 8 for sure, and possibly the 9th fell from. The fear is already going to be there. There are already guests stepping out on level 7 and allowing the braver guests to go on up. It's common on every tour you've led, you've seen it. And I think it speaks more to, this was a day and age that our modern guests have never experienced and can't imagine unless they go on up and see that. To be climbing out on those beams with no harnesses, no safety of any kind, just climbing to your post at the beginning of the day, putting in a sunrise to sunset shift, and then still having the energy to climb back down at the end of the day. And the scaffoldings collapsed regularly, and there was no outcry in the newspaper, no uprising from the public. It was just expected of these men to do that every day. And so I would gently and respectfully push back. I think it's completely appropriate that there would be one in the visitor center and another in the dome where they fell.
Thank you, Shane. Are there any other questions? Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I think this is a great cause, and we should have something out there. And I agree with having a display in the visitor center. I align with more of Joe on the plaque. I think there should be a plaque. I worry about, especially with kids going up in the dome, reminding them, oh, this is scary, and oh, by the way, people died up here. I get concerned about that. And also, to Joe's point of a lot less people will see that. I totally respect your position on like honoring them because that's where it happened, and I get that. And it's a balance for sure for this community to decide. But I lean towards more of what Joe's suggestion.
Yes, sir.
I would add to that, I think accessibility to the public, if it's going to be something that we are talking about, they need to have access to it. That's not accessible to all people. I think you could have something up there, but the exhibit or whatever is discussed in the historical tour would be something that's accessible to all people. And I think that's what that first floor would present.
Yes, sir. And I would take the opportunity to quit while I'm ahead. And if we can still get something in the visitor center that is accessible to everyone and can still be seen to everyone, I would quit while I'm ahead. Something in the visitor center is better than the nothing that we've had for the last 130 years, and I would take it and be pleased and honored just to have that if we could.
So back to my, I guess my first comment, is this something that we could just work with the State Historical Society and with Mr. McCoy on? It doesn't seem like there's a significant expense here. The content exists. It's putting it together and displaying it in an appropriate manner. And I believe you guys kind of set that space, don't you, or control that?
I think that the suggestion to come back with a proposal from us to the full committee for approval for the visitor center, and we can further examine at that meeting a plaque. Maybe it's more discreet and not up front, but it's still there for those that want to see it on the dome level. But certainly, I think everyone's in agreement, the visitor center needs this. So yes, I wrote down that we would bring that back to you at a future meeting. I'm not sure if we have it in time for our next meeting where we approve the suffragist memorial, but at least at our next meeting next year.
So I guess my follow-up is, does that require the approval of this full committee to add a display to the construction photos and something that already exists that you guys control? Because I don't believe we approved everything in that area. I don't want to wait a year, I guess is where I'm getting.
I think at this committee's direction, the Historical Society will proceed with some mock-ups to provide to you. And then maybe we can get further clarification on if that has to occur or not. But you're right, I don't think any of the other exhibits came through this committee. Is there someone else that had to come? Okay. Any other commentary on this? I think we all agree it's needed, and we will work toward it, and then we will sort out if there's any protocol issues. So thank you, Shane.
Thank you for the opportunity, everyone.
With that, we have reached the end of our agenda items. Is there any other new business that any of the committee would like to introduce? All right, well, thank you very much. I was told to remind everyone to complete your travel sheet if needed. And we will be in touch for our next meeting regarding the Suffragist Memorial mural. So appreciate everyone. Thank you.